In the fast-paced heart of Chicago, Julian Vance was a man who lived by the clock. He was a high-frequency trader, a man whose entire existence was measured in milliseconds and profit margins. At 50, he had the high-rise condo, the designer suits, and a reputation for being as cold as the wind off Lake Michigan. He believed that growing in life meant one thing: accumulation, more money, more status, more speed. But one Tuesday, the clock stopped. A minor health scare, a warning shot from his heart, forced Julian into a mandatory leave of absence. Suddenly, the man who moved at the speed of light was forced to stand still. Restless and agitated, he remembered a property he had inherited years ago from a distant uncle, but had never visited, a derelict apple orchard in rural Virginia. He drove south, trading the gray concrete of the city for the rolling greens of the Blue Ridge Mountains. When he arrived at Thorn Ridge Orchard, he didn't find the picturesque farm he had imagined. Instead, he found a graveyard of trees. The branches were gnarled and overgrown, the ground was choked with weeds, and the once famous fruit was small, sour, and withered. "Waste of space," Julian muttered, reaching for his phone to call a real estate developer. But there was no signal. "You can't sell a soul that's sleeping," a voice said. Julian turned to see an elderly woman named Martha leaning against a rusted fence. She was the neighbor who had watched the orchard go silent over the decades. "I'm not selling a soul, I'm selling land," Julian snapped. Martha smiled, her eyes crinkling like parchment. "That's your problem, city man. You look at a tree and see timber. I look at a tree and see a story that stopped halfway through. These trees aren't dead, they're just crowded. They've forgotten how to grow because they're too busy trying to survive the weeds." For reasons he couldn't explain, perhaps it was the silence, or perhaps it was the way his own chest felt as tight as the tangled branches, Julian didn't leave. He checked into a local inn, bought a pair of heavy-duty shears, and returned the next morning. Step 1. Clearing. Julian's first lesson in growth was painful. He started by trying to fix everything at once. He hacked at the trees, worked until his hands bled, and expected results in a week. But the orchard didn't care about his deadlines. "You're working hard, but you're not working right," Martha told him as she watched him struggle. "Growth in life isn't about how much you can do in a day. It's about what you're willing to let go of. Look at that tree," she pointed to a massive apple tree choked by thick, hairy vines of ivy. "The ivy looks green. It looks like part of the tree, but it's a parasite. It's stealing the nutrients before they ever reach the fruit." Julian realized his life in Chicago was covered in ivy. The endless emails, the shallow networking, the need to look successful. It was all green and shiny, but it was strangling his actual life. He spent the next month doing nothing but clearing. He pulled weeds, cut vines, and hauled away trash. The lesson: to grow in life, you must first identify what is feeding off you. You cannot grow new fruit while you are still nourishing old habits that take more than they give. Step 2. The deep cut. By the second month, the orchard was clean, but the trees still looked pathetic. Julian was frustrated. "I cleared the weeds. Why aren't they blooming?" "Because they're still holding on to the past," Martha said, handing him a pruning saw. "Now comes the part that hurts. You have to prune." She showed him how to cut away healthy branches that were growing in the wrong direction or blocking the sun from the center of the tree. Julian hesitated. "But these branches are alive. If I cut them, the tree will be smaller." "Smaller, yes, but stronger. If a tree has too many branches, its energy is spread too thin. The fruit stays small because the tree is trying to sustain too much. You have to cut back the good to make room for the great." Julian thought about his career. He had a dozen projects, 3 boards he sat on, and 100 acquaintances. He was a mile wide and an inch deep. He realized that growth requires the courage to say no to things that are okay, so you have the energy to say yes to the things that are vital. The lesson? Growth is not an endless expansion. It is a refinement. Sometimes you have to downsize your ego and your schedule to allow your spirit to finally reach the sun. Step 3. The patience of the root. The 3rd month brought a drought. The ground cracked, and the leaves began to curl. Julian was panicked, hauling buckets of water from the well. But it wasn't enough. "Stop running," Martha said. "You're treating the symptoms, not the cause. A tree that is always watered from the surface becomes lazy. Its roots stay near the top because the water is easy to find. But when the drought comes, those shallow roots dry up." She told him to stop surface watering. Let them get thirsty. Let them reach down. The deeper the root, the more stable the tree. Julian realized in his city life everything was surface level. His happiness depended on the daily watering of praise, stock prices, and luxury. When things got tough, he had no depth to draw from. He spent the drought months in the library, in meditation, and in long, honest conversations with his children over the phone. He was growing roots in the dark where no one could see. The lesson? Hard times aren't there to kill you. They are there to force your roots deeper. True growth happens underground, long before it shows up on the branches. The harvest. A year passed. Julian never went back to his high-frequency trading desk. He looked different. His skin was tanned by the sun, his shoulders were relaxed, and his eyes had lost their frantic shimmer. That autumn, Thorn Ridge Orchard didn't just produce apples, it produced a miracle. The fruit was heavy, dark red, and so sweet it tasted like honey. People from 3 counties away came to buy Julian's apples. One afternoon, a former colleague from Chicago drove up in a sports car. He looked at Julian in his flannel shirt and work boots and laughed. "Julian, what happened to you? You used to be the biggest guy in the room. Now you're just a farmer. Don't you feel like you stopped growing?" Julian picked a perfect apple from a tree he had once thought was dead. He felt the strength of the trunk and the depth of the soil beneath his feet. He thought of the fire of the pruning and the silence of the drought. "I used to think growth was a number on a screen. I thought it was about how high I could climb, but I was wrong. Growth is about how much of yourself you can finally set free. I didn't stop growing. I finally started." Conclusion. The story of the orchard is the story of every person who feels stuck at the top or trapped in the middle. Growth isn't a race to the finish line. It's the courage to clear the weeds, the wisdom to prune the unnecessary, and the patience to grow roots when the world feels dry. To grow in life, you don't need to move faster. You just need to be willing to become who you were meant to be before the world told you who to be.